Technologies are emerging out and we have to run along with this competitive world. So we have here with us our eminent guest lecturer, Mr. Nitin Soni. So I would like to call Ms. Surbi ma'am and Ms. Shivali on stage to please facilitate the guest. Can we have the round of applause, please? So before calling him on the stage, I would like to give some brief about him. He's currently working with 7N World Consulting and has worked with one of the good companies, Headstrong, Tory Harris Business Solutions Limited, Bangalore. He has a total experience of 4 years and 10 months. He has been designated as a senior software engineer. The technologies that he's good in: Java, JDBC, JSF, DB2, Spring Core, and Spring Web Flow. So I would like to call him and continue the session.
Hello. 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 Yeah, good morning all of you. And before starting, I'll just introduce myself. And yeah, I'm a senior software engineer at 7N World, and I'm working for a client called Jyske Bank. It's a Danish bank, and it's the third largest bank in Denmark. And before that, I was working in Headstrong for the client Goldman Sachs in Bangalore. And before that, Tory Harris Business Solution for the client called Orange. That was in the telecom domain. And today I will give you the guest lecture on the web technologies and J2EE, which I have an experience of around 4.5 years. So I'll just start with the slides. Yeah, today's agenda will be like, I'll just talk about the HTTP, on which the web is based, the web standards, the role of Java EE, then IDE which we use in industry, and the application environment which we have set up, the J2EE architecture, the servers we have, the servlets and the EJBs, the servlet container, the EJB container. All these are part of J2EE, and they run on the server, specific servers, we'll talk about it. The packaging of servlets, EJBs. Then we have the JDBC, JNDI. Then we have the coding patterns and the build environment, how we build the applications. Then the UML and JavaScript, and a little bit about the web services, which is the latest thing which we have in the industry. And a little bit about the project management, how we do the project management in the industry. Okay, the first thing we have is the HTTP protocol. Everything on the web is based on this. So what exactly is the HTTP protocol? HTTP is the foundation of data communication for the World Wide Web. So everything which you see on the web, every site which you open is based on HTTP. The extension of HTTP, or the HTTP with security, is called HTTPS. And the HTTP protocol is on the top of the stack of the application layer, where it's application layer protocol, where beneath this you have the transport layer protocols, that is TCP, UDP, network layer, then data link layer. Like if you see this part of this is the application, then you have the physical wires, the LAN, everything. Then again you have the same stack on the opposite side, that is the browser, the client. And if we see what is inside the HTTP protocol, we have the request methods: head, get, put, post, options, delete, trace, connect, and patch. And the most widely used are get and post. If you have worked on the web technologies, anything that is PHP, Java, .NET, then you must have come across these methods. And the most one used are the get and the post ones. Then you have the status codes, Like whenever your client application sends a request, that is your browser in this case, then every request responds with a status code. That is, it's a success, redirection, or server errors, and etc. That is 201, 202, 203, and other codes are there like this. Then HTTP, you have the persistent connections. In HTTP version 09 and 1, the connection is closed after each request. What does that mean? Now suppose you write a URL in your browser, that is your client in this case. Then the server will respond with an HTML page. So you have different links in that page. That is your image or any other resources. So browser will give the call to the server again and again. After that is, each connection will give a call, and you get the response for that. So that was pretty slow. Now you have HTTP version 1.1, that is pipelining was introduced in this version, and this is being used nowadays, and these are obsolete. So what happens now is, like when you receive a response from that is, if you type google.com or anything, then you receive a response, and then you have different URLs in the page itself, that is for image or anything. So without closing the connection, all these requests will be sent simultaneously without waiting for the response. So that is the pipelining effect in HTTP 1.1, and that is pretty fast. Then you have that HTTP sessions. HTTP is a stateless protocol. That is, the server will not recognize you once you make a request. That means that if I open the page or do something, so the server will not be able to recognize you that the person has logged in or anything or something like that. For that, there is a solution what is called as URL rewriting, HTTP cookies, and hidden fields. Now if you are doing any shopping or anything on the web, the server will be able to recognize you that what you have picked and what are the things which you are doing. That is done by URL rewriting, HTTP cookies, or hidden fields. Or there is a session object which is linked to your login on the server side. That is how it's able to recognize you. URL rewriting is like the server attaches a session ID with your URL. That will be either in a hidden field or in a HTTP cookies. If your cookies are disabled in the browser, which you can do it yourself, if you are using any browser which has the capability to switch it off, then URL rewriting will happen in the hidden fields or in the GET request itself. That you can see, like if you write yahoo.com or google.com, anything, then you can see there is a session ID attached to your link. That is how it happens. It's able to recognize you. Now the web standards. This is how your text appears on the web. That is your HTML.html files. Then you have the CSS. That is just cascading style sheets to take the layout, like how do you want to present your content. Then the JavaScript, it's a scripting language on the client side. It never runs on the server side. So it's able to generate some dynamic effects, the animations and all those things. And then you have the Adobe Flash. This is a new coming thing, and this is used for sites like you have youtube.com. Then you see the player. That is a SWF based player and Adobe Flash. And if your browser is not Flash compatible, then you will sometimes see that you need to download the Flash player before you can see the content on it. So HTML is just a hypertext markup language. It has nothing to do with the HTTP. HTTP is just a protocol to exchange the information, and the information can be based, it's a HTML or CSS or JavaScript or SWF or any other file which you want to, even a DAT file or anything, you can transfer it. But the browser should be able to recognize what the server is sending. For that we have the MIME types, and these MIME types are already defined in the browser. So if you are sending something from the server which the browser is not able to recognize, it will ask the user that you want to open this file with what. So that is a program installed on the browsers or the client side. Then where the Java comes into this, and I'll I'll start with J2SE. That is, it provides the core functionality of the Java programming language. You have the packages like NIO, collections, serialize, and basically the basic Java, which you have in J2SE. Then you have J2ME. This is a stripped down version of J2SE. It is used for mobile devices. Like new mobile devices, you have the Java running on them, you have the games and all those things. That runs on J2ME. Then you have the more stripped down version of J2ME, that is the Java card. Now you have the credit cards or some cards which have the small chip embedded in it. That's a microprocessor which has the memory and the processor, everything, but on a very small level. So you have the Java card on that. So small Java programs can run on that. And then you have J2EE. This is the version ahead of J2SE. This has additional packages like your servlets, EJBs. EJBs are your enterprise Java beans. Then you have JDBC and transaction capabilities. And yeah, we basically use this version for developing your web applications. Then the IDEs. Like you can write the program in a notepad also, but IDEs will help you write the code faster and manage your code in a better way. So Eclipse is the widely used IDE. Then you have the IntelliJ, and this is better than Eclipse, but it's not used because it's a paid version and you don't get it for free. Then you have the NetBeans. This is also the widely used for in the colleges and other areas. Then you have the JBuilder. This is provided by Oracle. I haven't used this one. So then you have the application environment. This is how an application will run in an industry or in a development environment if you have a proper setup. You have the local environment, that is your developer's machine. Now, this is a development environment where you have many developers working on a project. Then you have the test environment. When the application is built, it is put on the test server first, where the testers will test and any bugs or anything will arrive will be fixed by the developers. Then if the application is fully tested, then it is moved to the Medio. It is the environment which is just the replica of production, exactly the same. It's only the database connectivity which you don't have in this. You have the database connectivity, but it is not the production data. So you can just test your application how it will behave in the production environment, but without the actual data values, that's all. Then finally, after running it for 3-4 days or a week, depending upon the project, you move it to the production and it's a go live. Then you have your customers and everything accessing the production system. Now, here what you have is like the development environment where the developers are working on a project. Then you have the source repository. It is generally a CVS or an SVN where every developer will commit its code. So generally there is no conflict and each developer is working on different segments. But if you want to be secure, then each developer will lock its files. That is, I want to work on this so no one can edit these files till I am done. So that is your source repository. And there is a build server in between the integration server and the source repository. What it does is, when every developer is working on a project, side by side, it builds the application. That is, compiling and everything is done on the build server. It's an automated process. What it does is, it takes the code from source repository for that particular project and then compiles it, makes a build and keeps it on a location which you have specified. So if any errors are there, like if this developer has committed something which is not compatible with this developer or some collision has occurred, then this build server will send a mail to all the developers that because you committed something and therefore the source, it's not able to compile the source. So after the build server is succeeded, then it is put on the integration server or the test server you call sometimes. Then that's also automated process, or any of the developers will initiate that this build should be put on the test server. And in the source repository, you categorize your source in 3 levels. That is your trunk and the branches and the tag. So suppose you have released a functionality, then you tag your version. That is, this functionality is released in this tag. So you will put that tag into the test server and then the media and then the production. And after tagging the application or the source code, you cannot change that. If you want to make a change, you make it in the trunk. Trunk is your latest code. And you generally don't deploy the trunk on the test media or production. You can just test it locally that everything is working fine. And branches are used generally for developer or team of developer is doing some POC. POC on the project, and they want to incorporate some new functionality, but they are not sure that this will work or not. So they'll create a branch of it and they'll keep working on it. And the rest of the branch, the main branch, will proceed as it is. So if they succeed or if something productive happens, then they will merge the 2 branches and finally you have something new in that, and then you will tag it again. Then you have the J2E architecture. Now this is the client side, your browser. The pure HTML, the responses which you get from the server. The Java applet, these were introduced but were not of a much success because they were very slow. And how this executes is like you should have a JRE environment on the client side. That is, your browser should have the Java capability. And what the server sends is, server sends a small applet file which is executed by the JRE in the browser, and you get an applet in the browser window itself, but it's not being used much. Then you have the desktop also applications. Those can also directly connect to your web server or any other servers. Browser is just one of the clients. There can be desktop clients and other devices like your mobile or something which connect to the server and get the data from that. Now this is the server part of it, where you have the web server. The JSP is the view technology, where the JSP forms the content and send it to the browser as an HTML. And the Java servlet. JSP is basically the extension of the servlets. Then you have the XML. XML, if you talk about HTML, HTML is a subset of XML. Now XML has many more subsets like SOAP protocol. That's also in the form of XMLs. So you can directly send the XML to the browser, provided your browser should be able to know how to render it. But if you don't have anything special on the browser side, that is your JavaScript or anything which is able to understand the XML, then it will just show you the text which is coming in the form of XML. Then you have the web services. Now your web services can be made by using of servlets or an EJB. And web services can be accessed by any client, whether it's a .NET client or any other client, that is a browser or a desktop application, other devices. So anything can access. Even it's a platform dependent, we say it. And then you have, this is basically the servlet container where you have the JSPs and the Java servlet. Then you have the EJB container where you have the EJBs. EJBs can also be exposed as web services. We'll talk about this in the later slides, what web services are actually. Then your servers will connect to the database or the enterprise information system. It can be your LDAP. LDAP is basically for getting the user roles, what the user has access to, and the database, which database you want to connect to, and other things like any other system which you want to fetch the information and then send it to the browser. Now the different kind of servers, there are basically 3 categories: application server, web servers, and the HTTP server. HTTP server is a bare server with no servlet container or EJB container. It is just a redirection server. Suppose you are hitting, generally what you have is you have set up a HTTP server on the top, then you have the application or the web servers on the background. So you have a common URL. Suppose if you are making some site with xyz.com, then you will configure that XYZ URL on this server. And on the background, you can redirect that to a web server or an application server. And they are generally in clusters, these application server or web server, so that if one fails, the other one can take over. Or if there is a load on one server, then the HTTP server can redirect it to the other server. This is on the top, and it has nothing to do with the application which you develop. It is just a redirection and the load balancing server. Then you have the web servers, which is just a servlet container which runs the servlet application which you develop. And this is also provided by Apache and JBoss. Basically, every application server has a servlet container and an EJB container. An application server provides, other than EJB container, it provides other services like transaction management and database connectivity, connection pooling. If you want to do those things in a web servers, then you have to write your own code, or you have to depend upon the third-party libraries for that. And that's a symbol of Glassfish provided by Java. Then you have the Oracle WebLogic. JBoss is an open source application server. And Apache has a Tomcat. JBoss is built on the Tomcat, but both are open source. Then you have the WebSphere, that's an IBM product, and it's costly. And this is what you have inside a server. The business logic, we'll talk about. Yeah, the application server. You have the application client container, the web container, and the EJB container. The web container or the servlet container, where your WAR files or the servlet application which you develop is put, and the EJB container like executes your EJBs which you have in here. And EJBs are generally used to code your business logic. Now, your EJBs can be accessed from any Java client, but not the other clients. Therefore, sometimes you need to put your EJBs as a web service so that other platforms like .NET or C or other technologies can access that. And then you have the servlet. Servlets are used just to render the HTML or JSP pages which you have. Every content which you provide using servlets is an HTML based, but everything on this is HTTP protocol. Now coming to the servlets, and these are deployed on the servlet container. When you build an application using servlet, this is how the life cycle of a servlet is. First, when the server starts, it will create a servlet, initialize. Initializing means you will, at that point of time, you will create the connection to a database or a LDAP or anything which you want for running your application. That is getting the roles of user and the database connections, connection pooling, all those configuration is done in the initialize part. If it fails, you either unload it or the server will manage it by sending a response that the servlet is not available right now, or the application which you are trying to access is not available. Now when the initialize is completed, it's available for service. Available for service means like if you have seen the HTTP API, servlet API, then you have get post and do get and do post. So those are the two methods which will service your request. All the requests from the browser comes in a get or a post. Now generally these two are referred as same, but actually there is a major difference between them. And in the do get, any request which comes to the do get should not modify anything in the application. It just should send the response that this is how it is, and you are requesting for something which should not modify in the database or anything. But if you submit a form from the HTML, then it should come to a do post. And then based on the action which you perform, it should be able to modify the database or anything else on the system. And if you are doing some upgradation, then you can make your service unavailable and available, like goes on. And during the maintenance period, you will get a response that the service is under maintenance or some web page which you configure. And finally, if you want to undeploy it, it will goes to the destroy method, where you can close your connections or LDAP or anything which you have configured or taken the resources, and then you finally unload the application and it goes on. And this is the packaging structure. Now suppose this is an application which we are developing and it's a WAR file. So all your JSP, HTML documents, images goes under this. And there's a WebINF folder, and here we go with the web.xml, which tells you the structure of the web application, how it is, and you configure the listeners, the servlets, the context parameters, and then you have the compiled classes in this, and the third-party library jars which your application is dependent upon. And there's a security also which you configure in web.xml so that no one can access the JSP page directly. If it is not configured, you can get some errors, or someone can see the code of what is written in the JSP file. So all those goes in a complete .var packaging. Or you can do is, you can just put the index.html file under my app, and you can put all these resources under WebINF. So anything which is WebINF is automatically secured, and it should not be available by just typing the URL. But these things are can be accessed by just typing the URL. Then comes the EJB, that is your Enterprise Java Beans, and you need an application server to run them. So you have a local client or a remote client. Remote client can be your other Java application which accesses this EJB, and the local client can be your